Okay. Well, hello. Hi. We're live. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. For those that are here or those that are joining, my name's Ian McNichol, and I am Director of Services at NRAS. And what that means is I look after a lot of our front-serving services, such as our telephone helpline, our JIA services, how we engage with the community, with our different groups, whether that be working with some of our equality and diversity stuff. And I really work with how we can develop services moving forward and help the wider community. We're really fortunate tonight to be joined by Helen Braithwaite. And Helen lectures at the Staffordshire University, engaged her PhD in footwear and effects on foot function and pain. She has 20 years experience in musculoskeletal podiatry and has lectured in clinical biomechanics for over 10 years, something I'm really interested in, and I'm going to kind of like push her on it later in a bit. She's been an award winner, and she's very innovative and very committed to the community. Helen leads the Royal College of Podiatry for MSK, and is particularly focused on the rheumatoid community. I'm going to hand over to Helen. Helen, would you like to say a little bit about why it is that you're committed to that rheumatoid community and how it is you feel podiatry is so important for that group?
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, everybody. So within the Royal College of Podiatry, we have an initiative to extend the scope of musculoskeletal podiatry by increasing awareness with those that use it as a service, but also upskilling our podiatrists on the ground. And we're very aware that there's pockets of excellence throughout the country where podiatry services for patients that have rheumatoid arthritis are excellent and have fantastic facilities and staff that have specialisms in rheumatology, podiatrists that have gone on to do MSCs in rheumatology, and work in multidisciplinary teams. We're also aware that people have access to nothing and are not able to really gain NHS services, but a recent survey was done, and there's about 63% of patients who have rheumatoid arthritis do actually have access to NHS podiatry services, but that still leaves quite a large proportion of patients without necessarily the adequate services. So one of the remits that we're hoping to achieve is to give unity across the country, so that podiatry is available to those patients who need it. And particularly with rheumatoid arthritis, shockingly, the figures are around 92% of patients that have rheumatoid arthritis do actually have a foot and ankle problem. So podiatry is definitely the profession to sort that out, but we need to really get this alignment of service provision and specialism to meet the needs of patients in the community.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Helen, because obviously, you know, as somebody who works in the RA community, we're aware of the impact of RA on people's foot health. And yet, you know, one of the questions we're often asked is, why don't feet feature in the DASS, you know, disease activity score? Why is it they're not a fundamental part of that process? Why do you think that is?
Well, I asked that question as well, and that's probably one of the motives I have in driving the profession forward, is to get us recognised. And I think quite often and historically, we've done a fantastic job of aligning ourselves to diabetic foot problems, and a lot of patients who have diabetes have a number of complications with their foot. And podiatry has made a concrete bed now for providing foot services for diabetic patients. And that needs to be picked up on with other specialisms as well, and other disease profiles, so that people will be able to access podiatry and get the care that they need. And partly some of that is recruitment, partly it's keeping people within the profession. Unfortunately, the lifespan of a podiatrist is one of the shortest AHPs. So people tend to join the profession later on in life. It tends often to be a second career choice for individuals training to be podiatrists. And therefore that leads to them retiring and not having that long within the profession. So there is a high percentage of podiatrists that burn out before the time, which leaves us short on the ground. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
an issue that we're addressing as well, is recruitment and attracting people to it. But I'm sure you'll be aware that it's not the most glamorous of professions, and we don't market ourselves over in that way. In fact, most of the time, which drives me insane, is when people say, "Oh, what do you do?" I say, "I'm a podiatrist." They go, "Ooh, you look at people's feet." I'm like, "Yes, I do." And in fact, over the years, I go, "Well, at least I'm not a gynecologist," and I often get, you know, it gets a response for that. But so it is something that we're addressing within our profession, but it
Okay.
does lead us to challenges in service provision. Yeah.
Yeah, a really interesting question that's just come up, Hannah, from one of our viewers is: do you need a referral from a GP to access a podiatrist? How do you access a podiatrist?
Now, again, that's very particular to where you actually live. So some services have contracts with the NHS group within that area where you can self-refer into the service. So it doesn't need any GP referral. However, in other areas, you do need a GP referral to access it, and they have criteria around who can access that. But rheumatoid arthritis is a criteria that fits on most people's specification for availability to gain services. So it does depend just really on the geographical area, and that's all to do with contracts, with the funding and the way that the service is set up. So that's something that we're hoping to try and push and get some unity on, so that there are access to services no matter where you are. But it is either via your GP or through your local health centre. So if you're not sure, it might be an easier first stop to walk into your health centre within the community and just ask at the reception, and they would be able to direct you depending on where you live.
Are you entitled to this service, Helen? Is this something, you know, you could always go in there and say, listen, I want to see a podiatrist, and perhaps you're getting, you know, you're getting swerved away from that. Can you say, no, I want a referral, please facilitate that?
Yeah, and especially if there are criteria within the service. So generally, the podiatry services within the community are set up on two criterion. One is podiatric problem. So if you're a patient that doesn't have any problems with your feet at all and you're managing self-care, then you might score quite low on the podiatric need. But then there's also the disease profile. So it's recognised that there's certain disease profiles that obviously have more prevalence of foot problems, rheumatoid arthritis being one of those. So that would score you high on there. So there is a criteria, and that's mainly to manage resources and ensure that the people who desperately need podiatry services are getting it. Right. So if you are faced that you don't necessarily meet the initial criteria, then clearly a letter from your GP or the rheumatologist would support you to be evaluated and assessed. And sometimes that might just be that you need some footwear advice or that you need some self-care assessment. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you then need to have a regular appointment with the podiatrist. Similarly, it could be that they're able to help you and you have quite a chronic problem, and they can set you up on a course of treatment, or that, you know, you can be monitored if you have quite complex problems with your foot. It would be something that you kept on the cards for that length of time whilst you're having that problem. So there are a number of levels really of access and of service provision. And yeah, definitely, again, it's just unfortunately it's localized at the moment.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we have to assert ourselves in the NHS system to get the care we need. That's the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Yeah.
So something I'm really interested in, Helen, is the biomechanics. You know, I'm fascinated by the human body, how it works. Clearly, people with RA have issues around the way their body functions. Can you explain to me the way biomechanics works in terms of rheumatoid? Yeah.
So biomechanics, by definition, is applying mechanical principles. So we're going back to physics and maths, and you're looking at how they affect human tissue. So the actual science of biomechanics spans many, many different body parts. So you can look at blood flow, and you look at fluid dynamics within arteries, and there's specialisms around how that works, and different drugs and therapies that are used for the vascular system to improve fluid dynamics in the blood vessels. And then you can go as far as looking at the biomechanics of how insects interact with the wall, you know, how do geckos go up the walls and stuff like that. So the actual span of biomechanics is huge. Clinical biomechanics, which is the specialism that generally covers allied health professionals or people that work in musculoskeletal medicine, is looking very much at how movement patterns affect people in performance, or then with clinical biomechanics for pathology. So then teasing that down to the very, very niche market of rheumatoid foot and looking at gait dysfunction and pathology. When we're talking about biomechanics, we're looking at how muscles fire. So we're looking at the strength of the muscles and the ability of the person to move within a defined normal pathway. We're looking at impact forces onto the foot. So ground reaction force is something that we measure and we can look at, and that is the amount of force that's generated from you hitting the floor. And then we also look and specialize in pressure. So plantar pressures within the rheumatoid foot are very, very important, particularly when there's progressed disease and there's changes within the articular structures of the foot. The pressure can change because the joint profile alters, and that often alters the areas. So for those patients that have very complex and progressed disease profiles, they can get sort of spear-like metatarsals that changes the plantar pressure profile. That's quite a good word to speak of there. But basically that means the amount of pressure that goes onto the foot with each footstep, which can be not particularly the cause of the problem, because clearly the systemic disease is the cause of the problem, but it can be a result of that. So changes in plantar pressure can actually be the reason why people get pain. And then what we can do in podiatry is look at altering that. So we might take a plantar pressure profile, a measurement of how you walk, using a mat or an in-shoe device that allows for you to measure the amount of pressure that's on certain parts of your foot. And then from taking that reading, we can then look at different treatments that would offload certain areas, reduce pressure, alter the timing, so the length of time that you spend on different parts of your foot. So that's where podiatry as a therapy comes into its own, and we're able to apply those clinical biomechanical principles to the presenting patient and say, well, do you know what? This doesn't look so great. This is why you're getting pain, particularly around the forefoot in the metatarsal area, the second, third, fourth, and fifth metatarsal. They're very, very often they get changes there, and you can get bursas and calluses over that area. If we're able to record your plantar pressure, then we can look at reducing that amount of pressure. And reducing the frictions that come along with that. So the shear stress and also the loading forces. And we do that with orthotics, which are inserts that go inside shoes.
Well, that's really interesting. Can I just say, we've had someone here who said, I'm JIA, 43 years old, and I've only had a rocker sole adaptation in the last few years. It's made a massive difference. Fabulous. And then we've had 3 people who said, what type of footwear would you recommend for someone with RA? Have you any tips?
Okay, so I mean, that would be something therapeutically that we would use to help those mechanical measures that we've taken. So really the assessment that we do is a biomechanical assessment. We're applying mechanical principles to the presenting patient. And then that would be, so footwear would be a huge part of our treatment plan, alongside prescription orthotics if required. But sometimes footwear can be the thing that resolves the problem. Yeah. And really it depends on the presenting complaint. So depending on what the problem is with the patient, how far progressed it is, whether it's soft tissue, whether it's a joint issue, whether it's a callus, then the footwear would be self-directed and bespoke to that patient's needs. So it can be variable depending on what you need. So particularly with RA, you can get retraction and clawing of the toes. That's where the toes sort of come up into this type of position. And that causes a lot of problems around footwear fit, because the depth of the shoe of standardized shoes quite often doesn't fit because the foot becomes much deeper. And that can cause irritation upon the digits. So you tend to get like calluses along there because there's friction and shear stress on the footwear. So if that was a problem, then obviously looking for deeper shoes gives you the answer. Easier said than done. I'm very aware of that. But also looking for uppers that have a greater amount of flexibility. And over the last decade, certainly footwear comes in all shapes and sizes and all different materials. And there's one set of shoes that unfortunately not waterproof, but there's a technology where they can weave and knit the upper now. And a lot of training shoes use this, a lot of the Nike, and people might have seen Skechers as well with this fly. It's like a knitted weave upper that they create a very, very soft upper that then allows for functional deformities to be accommodated. Just choosing footwear around your specific pathology is really, really useful.
If I had a problem getting in and out of shoes, is there a particular type of shoe? Where would I go to find a product that might help me with that?
Okay, so that's really interesting, because we're speaking very much that rheumatoid arthritis affects just the feet, but one of the problems with footwear particularly is if there's any sort of joint changes within the hands, that can cause some issues around actually putting footwear on and fastening it. So it might be a patient doesn't particularly have too much trouble with the foot, but they're having some flare-ups in the hands and having some problems there. And actually putting footwear on causes an issue, and therefore they choose to wear a sloppy slip-on because it's really easy to put on. But that doesn't necessarily then help the foot. But recently there's been a couple of innovations that have been really helpful, and maybe I can just share my screen to show these. So
that'd be great.
Good old Nike have come out with a pair of shoes called Fly Ease. And these are designed for people that have disabilities and problems of actually getting their footwear on. And it is a slip-on shoe, but it has a function that keeps the shoe then on the foot. So if I share, because sometimes descriptions
absolutely
really come through.
If we could see it, that'd be great.
So I'm hoping that now has linked to my screen.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is the Fly Ease shoe. So you can see here that it actually turns into a normal training shoe, and you just slip it on, and as you then push the heel down, this part here acts like a spring, and it actually just clips up around your heel. I'll see if they show further down. No, it's just that one picture on that side.
I can see how that works. That is so neat and cool to work, isn't it? Really reduces the need for hands to put the foot on.
It does reduce the need for hands, and anybody that's interested, if they just put into YouTube Nike Fly Ease, they've got a really nice video that shows you how it works. So if you're interested in that, and they retail about £115, so probably a bit on the top end of trainers, but very competitive to other training products. So there's some benefit in that. I've also just got here, just to give some examples to people, this knitted upper. So you can see here that these shoes are made out of knitted uppers. Do tend to be of the trainer variety. Nowadays there's so many different colors with this technology that people can use these to get different styles and colors. And the benefit also from this type of shoe or trainer is actually the sole unit, this part of the shoe, is very beneficial to patients that have got RA for a number of reasons. One, the foam material that they use has very high shock absorbency properties. So the impact forces that I was talking about earlier that can be a result of changes within the joints, if they're elevated, utilizing footwear like this actually reduces them down. So it might mean that you don't need to have an orthotic by using this type of shoe. Similarly, another feature that's really useful in this style of shoe is something that we call the toe post. So I hope you can see this. So you can see on this blue shoe here how it tips up at the end, and it goes up, and it's not flat like this one is. That one's quite flat. So this is what we call the toe post or the toe spring. And this really helps people propel the body weight forward. So a lot of running shoes or walking shoes have this, because
that's why it curves up.
Yeah, so you get a curve up in the shoe like that,
Yeah, yeah.
and it actually helps you mechanically to move your center
Ah,
of mass forward. So the
right,
energy it takes to walk is reduced. So that's
right.
why they make running shoes like that. It also is seen in very stiff shoes. If you think of a wooden clog that's got a very high toe post,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you need that to actually get your body forward, because
Forward.
you can't flex it. So they tend to put it into shoes to help people move the body weight forward. But that can be really beneficial to patients with RA, because
Mm,
then it reduces the energetics. It stops you using as much energy for each
mm,
footstep,
mm.
which economically for people that have RA is a real beneficial thing.
Absolutely.
It reduces the amount of force at push-off in the push-off phase of the walking
Yeah,
cycle, where you
yeah,
propel your body forward. The
yeah,
amount of
yeah.
force that goes through the foot is reduced. So therefore, the amount of trauma into the joint of the thing. So you can therapeutically put a rocker on, but there is a number of footwear now that you can buy over over the counter that have rockers on them.
Mm,
And I don't know if anybody out there has been watching the Olympics and saw the special shoes that all the runners were in at the Olympics in Tokyo, particularly the marathon runner. If you're interested in watching marathon running, probably about 3 years ago, Nike provided some new technology with this new shoe, and one of the features is a 4-foot rocker.
right.
Therapeutically, we've been using that for years, but
Yeah.
now it's made it to sort of elite athletics.
Sports.
And
Right.
actually, the governing body for athletics had to put some restrictions on it because they were becoming so performance enhancing.
Interesting. So that's the whole biomechanics, how it improves the way the body works, reduces pressure and stress,
So
and
we
just
can, so they're using that to improve performance. So we can
yeah,
use that clinically. So all
yeah,
that science that's been put into improving that for performance, which brings money, doesn't it? If you break world records
yeah,
in somebody's
yeah,
running shoes, it's going to bring money into that company.
yeah.
But that can be used therapeutically. So actually, people then can benefit who have got foot pain from these running shoes that are being made. You don't have to go for the really high-end ones, but a lot of the technology is now filtering down into high street running shoes, and the foams that they're using and the design
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be really beneficial to patients that have foot. So I would say to look towards the athletic market if you're
Right.
looking at footwear. Should I stop
Okay.
showing this? It's not as nice
Yeah.
as our faces, Ian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So an interesting question's come up, Hen, and it's I suppose, about displacement. If somebody's got a problem with their feet, can that then impact on their knees and I suppose potentially their other parts of their body? Is it displaced as such and creates problems elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we call the kinematic chain. So it's that old song, your thigh bone's connected to your hip bone, and the connections are, and dependent on how you move or impact the floor, can result in changes around your knee and hip. So particularly for RA patients and those that have had problems with their ankle joint, the movement through the ankle joint allows you to progress your body weight forward. If there is a flare up there, or you've actually developed restrictions in movement, then you have to find that movement from elsewhere. So it tends to follow the next joint up. So you'll either use the front of your foot a little bit more, but quite often what you observe when that mechanical change occurs is patients flex their knee and hip more, so that it allows them to progress forward. So a good analogy that we often use in clinic to describe that is if you had a wheelbarrow full of rubble and you came to a pavement and you weren't able to get up, you would either have to create more force to get that up, or you would take a different direction to rotate to get the wheel up over the pavement. So similarly, when you've got the foot that loses that, what we call rocker, as it hits down onto the floor and you're wanting to progress the leg forward over the foot, that's where the hinge of the ankle works. If you've hit that pavement and you're not able to do that because there's no movement in there, you've either got to create more energy to translate your body weight forward, and you tend to do that from flexing the knee or the hip, or even sometimes progressing the head forward, which obviously puts strain on those joints if they're not strong enough to do that. So certainly up to the back, that there's evidence to show that changing the foot mechanics can alleviate pain further up the body. Yeah.
Interesting, really interesting. Somebody has an interesting question, and they clearly work on their feet all day. What would be your advice for them to manage that process? You know, how do they reduce the fatigue, the pain, and potential problems?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a challenge, isn't it, for people that have standing jobs? And there is some growing research to show that the amount of time spent on your feet can actually increase sort of soft tissue strain by 50%. So I mean, if somebody is in that situation where their role entails them standing all day, I would say if you can, take regular breaks, but also to have a lot of movement if you can. So if you're rigid standing, that you are able to maybe take some side steps or even just move a little bit. And if that's not possible, then just that you're moving your foot around whilst you're in that standing position. So quite often the pain and discomfort comes from standing. Say for you, I'm not sure what the role is, whether they're in retail or if they're in a manufacturing facility where they're having to take one thing from one side and bring it. You could be stood statically for a period of time. Similarly, jobs like kitchen staff or even theatre, you know, in hospitals, people that work in theatres. If you think of doctors and nurses that are standing doing operations, they don't really, if you're doing brain surgery, you don't really get to move around at that much, do you?
An intense concentration, isn't it? You almost escape your body, and then afterwards it's like, oh my God, you feel all the impact.
Yeah, so just moving within your footwear, but also getting footwear that has large shock absorbency. So there's some very specialist workwear that nurses and doctors and catering staff wear that allows for the impact forces to be reduced. But I would encourage that person to move a little bit more than they are doing. And if they are struggling, to then take regular breaks where they're able to just sit down for some moments, which will really relieve the stress. I suppose it's similar to those people that find themselves looking at a Zoom screen all day since the pandemic. I mean, sitting at a desk has the same sort of things. So the physios say for back pain to stand up and walk around and stretch, or everything else. So mixing it up is definitely the answer.
Yeah, interesting. So someone's talking about the running shoes, and they're asking, like me, they've got wide feet, and they're wondering, is there any particular brand that accommodates wide or extra wide fittings for some people?
Yeah. So you may have heard of the brand New Balance.
Yes,
which is an American company, and they do wide fitting shoes. They go up to 3Es for their running shoes, which gives you quite a good width.
So ease, what does ease mean? That's
yeah, it's a measurement of the width of the forefoot. So so if this is your foot, between the first metatarsal, which is classed as your bunion joint, that first metatarsal over to the fifth. So it's done. It's a minefield, footwear fitting, and really depending on which brand you're engaging in, it's quite difficult to stipulate. But more often than not, they base it on a centimetre measurement of the forefoot, and then that's correlated to a width fitting, dependent on what that is. So there's many resources on the internet that will show you that scale of the sizing and width fitting. But one thing I would say to people is to always engage in the retailer that you're purchasing the footwear from on what their sizing is, just like you would do for a pair of trousers or a blazer or a shirt, because each company has a different last that they manufacture their shoes on. Going back to that question there, for instance, footwear that's made in Japan, Asics and Mizuno, sometimes can be a bit narrower, because the lasts that they use in Japan are based on the Japanese population, and they tend to be a smaller stature and have narrower feet. So they can be narrower in shape, which is also beneficial for those people that have narrow feet to go and get shoes from there. but always engage in the retailers' descriptions of sizing, on length and width.
Yeah.
Because
That's interesting, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean, you see
will
at Marks and
vary.
Spencer's, a Marks and Spencer's 12 or 14 is different from, say, a
Yeah.
Next 12 or 14, as my other half always tells me.
Yeah.
What
And
do I know? But
you'll be shocked to know, Ian, that sometimes footwear is made in two different places. So you could have a right shoe made in Vietnam and a left shoe
really?
made in China, and then they
Wow.
come together and they just get
Wow.
boxed together. So
That's
don't
amazing, isn't it?
assume.
Yeah.
So you must always try left and right on, and
Well,
it's very common for people to have different size feet
a
as
classic
well.
one question: what if I've got one foot bigger than the other? You know, how do I buy shoes for that? What would you recommend, Helen?
Okay, so I would say most people have a sizing difference between the left and right foot, and that might just be a few millimeters, or that you know that your right foot's a little bit wider at the front, and most people are able to accommodate that. But if you have unfortunately had maybe some operations on your foot, or you've got some congenital deformity, or even that one foot has joint deformities and is shorter in length than the other, there are a number of places where you can get different size shoes. So there are some resources available. I took a note of those thinking that that might come up.
Right.
So there's a couple of websites where they have paired up odd size shoes. So there's actually
Okay.
a website called oddpairshoes.co.uk.
Wow. Okay.
And they have a number of different shoes where they've got a footwear left 3 and a right 5. So it's a matter of trawling through that.
Yeah.
There's also a brand called Wolky. Wolky, that's a good one, isn't it? WOLKY, and they also do odd size shoes. So if you are really suffering with more than half a size, so I would say that if you've got one that's 4 and one that's 6, then that's obviously a difference there.
Yeah.
So more than half a size, it would be worthwhile sort of looking at those resources. If it's less than half a size, you normally can manage to fit the shoe. And sometimes it's beneficial maybe in the smaller foot just to put a insole in the forefoot, so you can get ones that are just 3/4 length that just take up a bit more room in the toe box,
Right.
and that will help with fits there as well. So
okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one I have. Heels. I mean, we know I went to my other half, she loves her heels, but again, would you say heels are bad for you? You know, if somebody's got some issues, should they wear heels? Should they go flat? What's the best recommendation?
So by definition, a heel is a change in elevation between the front of the shoe and the back of the shoe. So anything that's got a build up at the back is classed as a heel height. I think sometimes when we say high heels, people automatically think of a 9 centimeter stiletto, maybe a high heeled shoe being that. But actually wearing a heeled shoe can be really beneficial, and anything up to 3 centimeters. And so that's still quite a distance between the front and the back of the shoe, and can give patients maximal function. So going back to that ankle problem I was explaining before, if you have a little heel of up to 3 centimeters, that actually frees up that mechanism. So it's like lifting the wheelbarrow up. If you lift the ankle up into a position where the foot's pointing down, you're actually improving the range of movement there. And anything up to 3 centimeters will beneficially do that. After 3 centimeters, research has shown that you actually start to lose your balance in that position. So for patients that have pain and dysfunction within the foot, it's not really a good idea to start using shoes that make you unstable. And similarly, it can transfer the load to the forefoot, which is where RA patients get most of their problems within the forefoot. So that also isn't a great idea, because you're actually forcing your body weight through the metatarsal heads, and that can create some problems. So heel height actually can be of benefit, but nothing more than about 3 centimeters. Saying that, if patients have got an occasion and they're wearing, maybe they're going to a wedding, or they've got a very nice function on, and they've got their nice shoes that they would like to wear with their outfit and image, then wearing a pair of shoes that is above that 3 centimeters for a very short period of time doesn't actually do any damage. So
Okay.
when we talk about high heels, it is the height of the heel, but it's also the amount of time that you spend in it. And
Right.
research has shown that it's only prolonged periods of wearing a heel height where you get physiological and biomechanical changes. If you do it just for short periods of time, so an evening out, a Christmas party, a wedding, then actually it doesn't do any lasting damage. And you may have foot pain the next day, it might ache a little bit, but most patients will recover from that and get on all right and get no residual problems from doing that.
Okay, great. So here we go. Here's an interesting question for you. Someone's been recently diagnosed with RA. Are there any particular exercises that you think would be good for their foot with a recent diagnosis? Is there something they should be doing which helps their ongoing condition?
Well, obviously working with the level of pain, so again, it's quite personal to what problems that patient's having or that person's having. So because if you've got a flare up in a joint and you're exercising it, it can actually make that worse and you can start to cause some problems there. So you do need to work with the pain and the level of activity that's going on in the joint so that you're not actually loading something that's in an active inflammatory phase. That's not really advisable. But if you're in a stable phase and everything's well balanced and managed, then physical activity gives you many health benefits. So working within your perimeter of sort of bands of fitness, I would suggest walking to start with. And that can be made more challenging and difficult physically by making the height of the hill you're climbing a bit higher, using different terrains. So using a cobbled terrain and then a grassy terrain, those sorts of terrains make the challenge a little bit more. And then obviously the speed that you're walking at. So as far as cardiovascular workout, when you start to walk at a speed where you can't talk to your friend, then you've got your heart going a little bit faster, and that will certainly give you some physical exercise from that. And then looking at other physical exercises, non-weight bearing things if you're in a flare up, so going swimming in warm water is really beneficial, and that gives you a good cardiovascular workout without actually loading the joints. I would tend to be saying to patients to avoid load bearing type activities, so running might not be the best thing for patients with active RA, but cycling might be a good alternative.
Swimming, fabulous. Helen, we're nearly at an end. We've got a couple of minutes left. I want to thank you so much for taking time to be here. Is there anything you'd like to finish up on to give the rheumatoid community any advice, any information on what they should do next? I know you said about accessing podiatrists. And I know from my experience of working in the community, feet is a massive issue. It impacts at so many different levels. What would be your words to sort of sum up advice to the community going forward if they're seeking help?
Okay, so if I put my clinician's hat on very much, so maybe that's a good way to answer this. I'll put my clinician's hat on and say, don't sit on a problem, go and seek out advice and let somebody tell you that there's not a problem there. So if you've got a persistent pain that's lasting more than a week, 10 days, and you're in a period of active disease process, then certainly go and seek out some advice. Don't take no for an answer. If that's going to be a hurdle for you, don't think, oh, well, it will get better. Because you tend to find that if you leave it longer, you're more likely to get problems with that. So that's my clinician's answer. So don't sit on a problem. As far as the Royal College and the work that we're doing there, we are raising our profile within MSK and particularly rheumatoid arthritis. So there's a roadmap for podiatrists to become specialised in this area. We've just released our MSK capabilities level for podiatrists, which gives them a clear direction of career progression. And we're hoping that that will lead young podiatrists or newly qualified into the areas of specialism of MSK, which RA is one of them. And then screw that hat off and then put academia hat on.
So many hats.
I know. I'm like Wurzel Gummidge. And then for those people that know who Wurzel Gummidge is.
Aunt Sally, I remember.
And then research-wise, there's a growing pool of evidence to support rheumatoid foot problems. So we're learning every day about the types of problems that people come to therapists with, to rheumatology to medicine with, and particularly in the area of footwear, it is well recognised that therapeutic footwear isn't always the answer for rheumatoid patients, and that there are alternatives to that, and the commercial people are working alongside researchers to develop new innovative pieces of footwear that are comfortable, that are affordable, and also give you the image that you're wanting to do. So hopefully the future is looking a lot brighter for patients with RA. Yeah.
Helen, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's
My
been
pleasure.
really,
I've been
really
pleased to come
informative.
along. Thank you.
And I tell you what, we're going to distribute a lot of that information you've got, such as the
Okay.
pictures of the shoes and all the stuff. We'll
Oh,
make sure
okay.
that's
Yeah, no
available
problem.
to the community. Thank you. It's great to hear from you. It's a massive issue for our community. So thank you for taking time out of your really busy schedule
No
this
problem.
evening and being with
Yeah.
us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.